In any form of fiction involving superpowered beings, it's always possible for a character to be written in who is just way too overpowered. Like their powers are just so ridiculous and unfathomable that it's hard to put them in any kind of dramatic situation. Sometimes this can actually be used to very creative effects, like in One Punch Man, where Saitama's main conflict is that he's too powerful and nobody can give him a good fight. But in a lot of other cases, this can just result in all tension vanishing when the hero arrives, because we all know that no villain is tough enough to beat them. It always depends on the writing. Any character can be interesting given the right circumstances. But regardless, I thought it would be fun today to take some popular characters who are famously overpowered and rewrite their stories and redesign them if they weren't overpowered. In fact, if they had no powers at all. How would they act different, and how would they look different, and would their personalities change? Thought it would be a fun writing challenge and hopefully a fun design challenge. So I hope you all like it too. And by that I mean two different things. One, I hope you enjoy the video that's about to happen, and two, I hope you hit the like button to help placate my mysterious and merciless overlord, the YouTube algorithm. But regardless of what you do, it's time to jump into the video with our very first one, One Punch Man. Let's go! Saitama was the happiest hero around. From a distance, you likely wouldn't be able to guess why. He was a C-ranked hero with no abilities who often took on foes much stronger than himself and would frequently get seriously injured. Saitama could take a hit like a champ and had some padded armor on his suit to help protect him, inspired by a hero friend of his, the Mumen Rider, but he'd still leave battles massively pummeled in many cases. He lost more fights than he won, and low-tier villains would often be excited to see him coming because they knew there was a good chance they'd get away with their crimes when he was the hero on call. But none of this bothered the energetic hero. See, Saitama lived for the thrill of the fight and the danger that came with facing off against foes who he knew could best him if he didn't bring his all. He reveled in his victories because he knew how hard he worked to get to a point where he could win any fights at all. Saitama had been a relatively weak man before starting his training, after he decided to become a hero, which consisted of 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run every single day. He'd get up at 4 a.m., do this workout, and then go about the rest of his day. It was great for getting him into peak physical condition at first. It obviously didn't give him any superhuman abilities because, while intense, it is just a pretty standard workout that any determined human being could do. And after he'd done that for a while, he switched up his routine and would thereafter figure out a new, equally intense workout every couple months to ensure he didn't grow complacent or bored. At any chance he could, Saitama would also get B and sometimes even A ranked heroes to give him some combat lessons. With his lack of abilities, he needed to learn as many tactics as he could to potentially take down high-powered enemies, using their own strengths against them. He slowly became a master of every weapon he could find, training with heroes proficient in each of them, and would choose one for each battle, determined by what villain he was facing and what they may struggle against. His methods would often fail, but that would just lead him to work even harder to figure out something else that may work better in the future. Despite his weaknesses, he was a determined hero through and through. And while he didn't love to lose, he'd often look at some of the S-tier heroes who never seemed to lose a fight and almost pitied them. If there was no danger in the fight, it mustn't feel like a challenge, and he couldn't imagine it being any fun. And at the end of the day, Saitama was a guy who just wanted to be a hero for fun. And for him, all the fun came from the challenge of trying to conquer foes more powerful than himself. Kal-El was sent to Earth by his parents as his planet Krypton was in its final days. His parents had chosen Earth because its inhabitants looked exactly like Kryptonians, and because the atmosphere was near identical to their own. Kal was found by the Kents, renamed Clark, and grew up as a totally normal child despite his extraterrestrial roots. As Clark grew to his teen years, he was a star student in every regard. He consistently got straight A's, he was the editor of the school paper, and was the quarterback of the football team. He was strong and smart, but not to any superhuman degree. The part of his life that held most his attention, however, was his reporting. He was never satisfied with the simple small-town Smallville stories, and wanted to pursue bigger world issues to write about. In his final year of high school, he took it upon himself to do a deep dive investigation into LexCorp's shady chairman and CEO, Lionel Luthor. There had always been rumblings that LexCorp abused workers, dodged taxes, and had committed a litany of corporate crimes, but they were practically untouchable because of all the politicians allegedly in Lionel's pocket. And while Clark wasn't able to get any evidence serious enough to lock anyone up, the article he eventually wrote was picked up by the Daily Planet, because it had just enough evidence to be worth reporting by a major paper. This article ended up shining enough light on the shady corporation to ruffle Lionel Luthor's feathers, as well as get Clark some serious attention as a journalist. Clark worked part-time at the Planet through university and wrote some big stories for them, and as a result had a full-time job waiting with them when he graduated. At that point, he went all in on his journalism. He focused on corporate crime, corruption in police forces, trying everything he could to reveal injustices wherever they may be, and hoping that his articles would result in real justice being doled out. But that rarely happened. People would be outraged by the stories, but the companies would make apologies, throw some money around, and everyone would eventually just forget. But Clark wanted justice. That was when a budding vigilante in Gotham caught his attention. The Batman had managed to take down whole crime empires and expose crooked cops who were actually put on trial. While Clark didn't approve of how violent the Bat's methods could be, he saw someone actually getting results and was intrigued. So Clark started writing a story about the Bat as an excuse to investigate and try to get close to him. Clark eventually managed to find the Bat in person and told him that he wanted his help. He told Batman about all the leads Clark had in corporations that needed to be brought to justice and how his reporting on them just wasn't enough. Though skeptical at first, Clark's persistence and genius reporting eye eventually convinced the Bat to work alongside Clark. He even trusted Clark enough to eventually reveal his identity as billionaire Bruce Wayne. An ironic turn for Clark to find out he was working alongside the CEO of a major corporation. Clark didn't fully approve of how much of Wayne Enterprises' money was being funneled into Bruce's vigilantism, but he let it slide for the time being in the name of the greater good. At first, Clark was simply getting leads and doing research to point Batman in the right direction, but eventually they saw they needed more people out on the prowl, specifically in Metropolis. Alfred and Bruce would intermittently help train Clark to be a master in physical combat, to ensure he could protect himself if he ever needed to. They'd even build him his own suit, but one that Clark would adjust visually to fit his own aesthetic and message. See, while Clark did respect that Bruce's focus was on striking fear into those who broke the law, Clark saw his role differently. While he was trying to expose and end injustices, this was all in pursuit of a peaceful world. He wanted to give hope to those who had been wronged by powerful people, and make sure that nobody would ever have to be exploited by those with immense riches and power ever again. He donned his new suit, added an emblem from his home world, and became a hopeful hero for Metropolis, and eventually the world. This is just my annoying mid-video call for subscribes, because if you've watched this far, you're probably enjoying yourself, so you should subscribe for more stuff like this, because I do 2 videos a week. Or maybe you've just watched this far so you can find more stuff to yell at me about that I got wrong in the lore. Just wait till the Dragon Ball part. I'm not as up on my Dragon Ball knowledge, so I might have messed up some stuff. I don't know, we'll see. It's an alternate universe either way, so I can always just use that excuse if I get anything wrong. Oh, also apologies, but an ad's about to play, most likely. I know it's annoying, but I gotta make a living somehow, right? But when it's done, back into drawing. Galactus was what you might consider to be the ultimate foodie. He was an extraterrestrial being, but one whose physiology was essentially like that of a human, save for the fact that he had a much longer lifespan. What he had chosen to do with his life was fly in his ship from planet to planet, trying out all the most renowned delicacies from each culture that he crossed. Of course, in order to do this, he had to acquire currency from each of the planets he visited. Galactus had tried doing different work on various planets over the centuries, but often found it too slow of a process to find respectable work that paid enough, quickly enough, for him to have the meals he desired. That was what eventually led him to working for various crime lords on different planets. With his lengthy time in the universe, he could easily get training on various planets to become a master combatant, and was willing to use these skills for whatever high-paying crook needed him. See, Galactus had little in the ways of morals. He'd seen so many lives start and end in his existence that life meant little to him. His only goal was to eat and eat and eat. He was a true hedonist. Eventually, he was doing well enough that he even hired himself a food scout named Norrin Rad. He got a sleek silver ship for Norrin and paid the man to fly ahead to different planets to scope out the best cuisine. He'd prioritize planets that had the most intriguing foods, and the easiest access to paying criminals. Norrin was never thrilled with the work he did for Galactus and disapproved of the foodie's lack of morality, but Norrin needed the money. His family was impoverished, and there were few good-paying jobs back home. This was a way for him to send wealth back to his community and loved ones so they could lead fuller lives. But this life did weigh on Norrin for years. When Norrin came across the planet Earth, he did find plenty of intriguing foods, and many criminals that would be willing to pay for a good fighter, but also found the planet was full of heroes who would be able to take down Galactus when he inevitably committed crimes on their planet. After a decade of working for the outlaw foodie, Norrin was finally ready to turn on him. Norrin contacted the nearest team he could find, the Fantastic Four, and told them of his master's impending arrival. Norrin assured them that Galactus would find any paying criminal to work for, and they could then take him down. Of course, it wouldn't be so easy, as Galactus quickly came to work with Wilson Fisk, who put him to task alongside a team of other skilled fighting criminals. The whole event would spiral until Galactus and Norrin were in the midst of a shadow war with the underbelly of New York's hero and villain scene. Galactus fighting alongside Fisk's goons, and Norrin working with the Fantastic Four and the heroes of Hell's Kitchen. And all this simply because Galactus wanted a good meal. The event would not be the end of Galactus, but he would be forced to leave the Earth after only having a single decent meal, swearing to one day return to devour all the delicacies that Earth could offer. Through his life, Goku had amassed many friends, but even more enemies. And while he and his friends have collected and used the Dragon Balls for good, it was only a matter of time until someone turned them against him. Eventually, Goku made a foe who grew tired of Goku's meddling, gathered up the Dragon Balls, and wished for Goku to become mortal, stripping him of any Saiyan abilities and superhuman strengths. After that, he couldn't fly, project any forms of energy, and he certainly couldn't use any Super Saiyan forms. He was truly immortal through and through. But that wasn't the end of Goku. As he had before, he could still train to be better, to become the best version of himself even in this weakened state. And while his highly powered friends would have to take on tougher foes, Goku could still be an asset in battle. He had an altered version of his Saiyan battle armor made to protect him in combat. It encompassed almost his entire body and was made to be more durable, to absorb attacks powerful enough to kill him without the armor on. He'd also train with a sword akin to that of future Trunks, just to have one more combat option in his arsenal. And while Goku would have to sit out on some fights, he could still occupy his time training and prepping to fight in the World Martial Arts Tournament, where his mortal state usually wasn't any kind of serious hindrance. After his third time entering, once he had a few years of training up his mortal state, he finally managed to win, and from there on was the reigning champ. Goku had eventually learned to thrive in this weakened state and had found ways to enjoy himself, but it couldn't last forever. Eventually, Vegeta grew enraged by the fact that he'd been stripped of his combative rival for so long. He needed his competition with Goku to push him to become a better version of himself. So after years of waiting, thinking Goku would do this on his own, Vegeta eventually regathered the Dragon Balls and wished Goku be returned to his former glory. But his time as a mortal meant that Goku was that much more skilled a fighter at full strength. He learned fight techniques that he never would have thought to try before, and came back to full strength as a far superior fighter to what he had ever been before. Much to Vegeta's dismay. Okay, now this was definitely a lot of fun, but I also think it might be even more interesting to do this in reverse. Take some famously low-powered or no-powered heroes and redesign them and rewrite them if they were super overpowered. Like, what would an OP version of Black Widow or Hawkeye or the Moomin Rider be like? I think it's very likely that I'll do that in the near future, especially if this video ends up doing well, which I have no idea if it will. It was a bit out there concept-wise. But either way, give me suggestions for characters with no powers that you think it would be cool to turn into overpowered versions of themselves. And of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure to check out other videos I got using lots of these characters. Actually, this was my first time drawing Galactus, but I've worked with Superman before in stuff like my Justice League Venomized episode. I recently did Goku if he was in a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure kind of story with a bunch of other manga and anime characters. And off the top of my head, I can't think of the last time I worked with Saitama, but I'm sure I'll have a clip up as I'm talking now. But anyway, everybody, that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been Popcross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you all in the next video on Monday, in which I'm finally going back into the Popcross D&D universe. Get hyped for that, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.